Hello everybody, this is Havoc, and welcome back to our Crusader Kings Dev Diary series, what I will call the Summer Edition, where we get these little teasers instead of full-blown Dev Diaries. Now this was mentioned in both the last developer diary I did, as well as Paradox themselves. They are on vacation since I would say the end of June, and they probably won't be back until the middle of August, where they will resume the typical developer diary things. As we get closer and closer to the Royal Court DLC, which we still don't have a date on. So in this, we are combining teasers number 1 and 2. 2 is just released today on July 13th. Obviously, number 1 was released last Tuesday. What we're going to take a look at are simply some traditions and their breakdowns, as well as the rest of the ethoses that we haven't seen thus far. Now, as a quick reminder, as with anything with developer diaries, the modifiers, their amounts, etc., are not final. So don't take this as canon per se, but still we can kind of glean basically what their goal is simply by looking at the modifiers and what they are aiming to do. So let's dive into teasers number 1 and 2 for Crusader Kings 3. So we're going to get straight into the traditions. There are a small handful. This is not all of them, but they do represent some vastly different types of gameplay style, which I really enjoy. And having just finished the Emirate of Cordoba campaign, where we tried to avenge the Battle of Tours, seeing some of these would be immensely helpful once the update comes out. And I'm tempted just to do another run just to, you know, bring some of these traditions into the field. But By the Sword is our first cultural tradition, and it gives a no limit to the number of kingdom level holy wars that can be declared on by any one ruler, and all cost us bellies that require a specific level of devotion require one less. I honestly don't know. Now, if I remember correctly, you can have several of these traditions all at once, and I don't know why you wouldn't want to have By the Sword on it. I don't see too many people that are so hardcore focused on a peaceful or diplomatic playthrough that By the Sword wouldn't be relevant to them at some level. Now, again, as the Avenging the Battle of Tours, there are a lot of kingdom level wars that you are going to want to focus on. And obviously with some of these bigger wars, especially kingdom levels, they require a rather high level of devotion. So for any means by which you think you will start conquering at that level, By the Sword is going to be a very solid choice. Now there are some caveats here. For all characters, diplomacy per level of devotion is -1. Your martial per level of devotion increases by 1. Your monthly piety decreases by a solid chunk, and your different faith opinion goes down by even more, which I think is at a natural -50 for most diplomatic things, would then obviously be down to even further. -65 total would be here, but again, those modifiers may not be by full release. Now this is interesting because it gives you, I felt like it was a little bit overpowered just to say, hey, unlimited number of kingdom wars, but reducing that piety means you're just not going to be able to constantly go after those number of kingdom level holy wars, and that also gives a rather good incentive to focus on piety generation to kind of offset that huge decrease percentage in which your monthly piety would be generating by. So again, I think if you are going to play as any sort of warring state that would hit those kingdom level tiers, especially as a pious person, By the Sword is 100% going to be one of those traditions that you'll want to keep. Collective Lands is granting counties to commoners will increase county control and makes them a peasant leader. Now, we don't know what a peasant leader does per se, but we can assume it increases county control. Now, unfortunately, it does increase building construction time because they are a commoner, not a noble, so they wouldn't obviously know things about construction. Their development growth, however, increases by 20%, but their control growth decreases. So it's just the idea that if you have a rather stubborn area, and we've seen this in events, it's a reason for peasant uprisings, and that's just simply you could give land to a unlanded person of the local area, makes them a peasant leader, which I'm sure gives them some buffs, but also just increases the county control right off the bat. Now this is rather important for areas of just very high hostile areas, including different cultures, different religions, a combination of both, where you could potentially find a noble and give it to them. But even then, it's going to take time for that county control to increase. So by giving someone maybe with the high stewardess skill that is unlanded, giving them, which I frequently do by the way, to that way I get another vassal, and also it just gives them a good chunk of land, which gives them money, which gives me money. It gives you another incentive to really making peasants or unlanded characters the ability to hold land and do stuff with it. Isolationist. I'm not really sure under what condition you would want to have the Isolationist, especially if you can pick. Now, obviously, some cultures, and especially if you don't own the DLC, you'll get stuck with that Isolationist cultural tradition, but it's a doozy of one that I don't really know is worth adopting if you have the option. So first, idle courtiers are less likely to become wanderers if liege is of their same culture. Marriage acceptance towards other cultures is minus 50%, or minus 50, excuse me. Very unlikely to arrange marriages outside their own culture. Culture acceptance gain, which we've talked about related to the DLC, is minus 35%. And then all characters get a diplomatic range debuff, but an increase in same culture opinion, and also controlled growth goes up by 0.5 a month. Now that is a decent ways, but again, if you're playing as an isolationist, you're probably not going to want to expand into areas where you're going to have issues with control via other cultures, other religions. So this one seems like something you would get stuck with to make a campaign more difficult, rather than something you want to adopt. Unless you just really want to keep it in the culture kind of a deal, which again is feasible and totally possible, but I have no issues marrying outside of a culture. It just spreads your own influence out a little bit. So this is a really, really negative one in my opinion. And if you have a different view on it, please let me know how you could spin this very positively. But as for me and my house, we will not be isolationists. Moving on to mystical ancestors, and this is one of the ones that I really enjoy and would provide a really unique playthrough. So as mystical ancestors tradition, they cannot disinherit dynasty members, which is a pretty big deal. However, you gain renown when you grant a title to a house member, and you lose piety when revoking a title from a house member. Now this is your own house, mind you, so if you wanted to remove it because you didn't want them to inherit lands, etc., you would lose piety, is basically it. But then it also gives incentives to your own family, and that renown boost is pretty daggum huge as well. But then lastly, a dynasty opinion is plus 10. So that way, if you were to be a kin slayer, as it were, that hit wouldn't be quite as bad. But it's just a really cool idea to keep the lineage close, basically, and really focus on that narcissistic side that your family is the only people that deserve to have lands and all that sort of stuff. Next up is Stalwart Defenders, and this is another one that I really enjoy and would be a very big focus if you start as a large empire, be it East Francia or the HRE or even the Byzantine Empire. Starting or being able to modify this tradition right off the bat would be highly favorable. And I'm also thinking maybe for England, if you were able to do that pretty quickly. So for Stalwart Defenders, you get a defensive war peace acceptance of plus 10, prestige from winning defensive wars, and gold of an increase of 100%. All of your characters get a defender advantage of plus 5, and all holdings increase their garrison size by 25%. So again, if you get picked on a lot, which will happen, in the first time I did my Emirate of Cordoba campaign, I was frequently attacked by Christian kingdoms, as it were. So I had several defensive wars. This Stalwart Defenders would have helped me immensely. But again, it's the idea that you can be an offensive player wanting to expand your lands, but also have a need for defending the homeland. So as a large nation like East Francia, or even the Seljuks, or as you get larger, being able to modify your cultural tradition to give that incentive to end a defensive war quicker, to gain more from ending that defensive war. You're giving an advantage to all characters, and then having all holdings increase their garrison size. It's a pretty huge deal, and one that I would be willing to have pretty much regardless of how I play, unless I'm just starting from a very, very, very small type of culture to become bigger. Last up of the traditions in the teaser number 1 is Staunch Traditionalist. And again, this is another one, and I don't really know why you would do it, but maybe it's one of those things you get stuck with. The stubborn trait is more common. Your conversion to local culture decision costs are increased by 300% for prestige. Massive. Creating a hybrid culture requires 100% more cultural acceptance. It's also much harder to hybridize with this culture. All characters get control territory defender advantage, control growth increase, but cultural fascination progress decreases by 10 as well. So again, if you can find a way to positively spin this, I would like to hear it. But as a staunch traditionalist, it's basically just going to be very, very hard to take advantage of the mod, or not the mod, of the DLC at hand, because you really just can't convert easily whatsoever. Not to mention, you just have a lot of cultural acceptance issues. You're going to have a hard time, basically. So you would adopt this if you wanted a hard run, or if you're stuck with it at the beginning of the game. That's about it. So as you can see from these handful of traditions, you have a huge array of gameplay options and things you can do. And this is obviously not all of the traditions. We've seen a few before this. There's no doubt going to be a few after. And again, they're modifying all of it at any point in time. So don't take the, monthly piety percentage as canon. Don't take your development growth or your construction time, etc., etc. These are all up for grabs. It just depends on what the final balance looks like. But overall, I like the idea of using traditions. I'm very, very excited to see what all becomes of it and how we get to implement it effectively. Now we're moving on to teaser number 2, where we see a very small handful, I believe 4 different, the last of the ethoses, as it were. They've shown us bellicose, inventive, and spiritual, but now we get to see communal, courtly, egalitarian, and stoic. So let's get on into it. For the communal ethos, all characters have a same cultural mercenary higher cost of minus 15% and close family opinion increase of 5. All holdings also receiving minus 10% reduction in time and cost. This is pretty good, as we as may or may not know. Mercenaries will also be cultural rather than just being the mercenary. So focusing on your own culture in terms of hiring mercenaries, you'll see a decrease in cost, which could significantly help because those mercenaries tend to get rather expensive. And then your close family opinion. When you see that secession hit, it's going to be a little bit easier to handle that. Not to mention you get a little bit of a nice little discount, basically, in your construction time and your construction costs, which over time, for all holdings and all characters, could add up to a pretty little penny. Next up is courtly. So for this, it's aptly named the French characters. You get a monthly prestige increase of 15%. Your title creation costs decrease by 15%. So something on like the kingdom level, you are seeing 150 gold reduction. Duchies will be what? That would be 75 gold, etc., etc. That's a pretty good chunk of change to be withdrawn from. Your house opinion is +5, which is always fantastic. And then this is the first one we've seen that directly relates to your DLC directly, and that's court grandeur base is +10. So we mentioned that the base requirement for your grandeur is set based on various factors. The ethos of the courtly series is going to help with that. Basically means you are going to have an easier time building up your grandeur and keeping it at a set level. Fits pretty well. I like it. Egalitarian gives an a cultural acceptance gain of +35%. All characters see a vassal limit increase, different culture opinion +5, and different faith opinion +5. So this is the opposite of the isolationist, and I really like it because you're going to want to pick this ethos if you really want to focus on hybridizing an empire, or a culture rather, because that cultural acceptance gain is going to allow that much, much quicker, which is also really interesting to see how the AI appeals with that. Because for me, like I said, I really just want to try a Viking Indian culture mashup. So picking egalitarian would allow me to do that quicker. And the earlier that happens in the game, I would like to see how it affects the long-term goal of how everything else spreads in the region and elsewhere as the AI takes it and runs with it. I really like egalitarian. It's probably going to be one of the first things I'll choose when I can modify my own series. And then the last one is stoic, in which all characters receive a small health boost, a reduction in stress gain, and friendly fatal casualties -15%, with a defender advantage of +5. So this is obviously one of the more learned kind of areas, I would say, if you wanted to focus on learning. Give yourself a boost to last a little while longer, or if you are, it would also work in a little hostile situation. Combining stoic with the defender tradition would actually be a pretty hefty defender advantage overall, as well as, giving you an incentive to win wars. Your stress gain, no matter what's going on, is going to decrease. So the combination of all of this is going to be fantastic to see as well. So that's it. that's all we got. It's not a whole lot, these teasers 1 and 2, but I'm still very excited for the contents therein. Being able to mash up different combinations, I may even make like a video where it's like a top 5 culture mashups kind of a deal, where I lay out a system where I say, hey, this ethos combined with these cultures, this is what it does, and it's fantastic. Or if you really want a challenging run, combine this ethos with these traditions with all these other pillars and see how it runs. I really like it though. I think it's going to be a very solid DLC. I'm excited to see what else they show off before we actually get the DLC. So I'm looking forward to the teasers, what else they have while they're on break, but also looking forward to getting back into the meaty grind of things overall. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Again, this isn't going to be very intense. I'm still looking at 15+ minutes of content, so it's not that bad. But if you did enjoy the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on bell notifications. It is the best way to stay up to date on the channel and with other strategy news. There's a lot going on the channel right now. If you want to take a look at any of my videos on demand from my streams, we just wrapped up my Emirate of Cordoba campaign on Twitch. So if you want to hang around on the channel to see the last 4 episodes of that or catch up, you can certainly do so. Lastly, if you want to purchase the DLC pack, whether it be the Royal Court or the expansion pass, you can do so on my Nexus game account, which is down below. Gives you a 100% valid key that you can redeem via Steam. Nothing sketchy whatsoever. It's one of the best sites. They work directly with publishers and developers, so you know you're not getting any shadily bought stuff. And it's a great way to support the channel as well. Guys and gals, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. This is Havoc, and I'm out of here.